Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar with Aaron Ross. We're just going to wait a couple minutes here to get started. Let a few more people get logged in. So grab a Diet Coke or your favorite drink and we'll get started in just a minute. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn it over to Aaron Ross, author of the best-selling book, Predictable Revenue. Aaron.
All right, Mike, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
We got you. You're good.
Yep. So today, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to jump into it. We'll talk about how CEOs and probably, regular people break revenue plateaus. Now, if you're on my newsletter, I mentioned there's a duct tape story involved, which we'll get to that. Not unlike breaking a sales plateau. But for me, again, this is Aaron Ross. I wrote a book called Predictable Revenue, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. Some of you may not have. It's been a bestseller for a few years now. And I'm actually working on a sequel. So the first one was called The Sales Bible of Silicon Valley by people. I'm not sure what this next sequel will be called. But in both cases, or what we're in general trying to do is help you break through these hot coals. So there's companies get started, or you start maybe a new job, there's some situation, you get some progress at the beginning, then you try to grow, and you run into problems. So how do we get through those and to the side where we have some sort of repeatable system, break through and grow? A tentative title, it's going to change, but this Predictable Revenue Guide to Tripling Your Sales is sort of the sequel to the first book. I'm doing it with a guy named Jason Lemkin. There's a free version, and we'll send this to you afterwards, but it's up at predictablerevenue.com/triple. And I think, it's interesting, some of you are on my newsletter, some not, but, in having a family, and I'll get to sort of, sales plateaus, but my background, I worked at Salesforce. Again, I think people have known me for, and with the first book around helping them create, in a few years, this is a ways to go $100 million in extra revenue. By now, it's a lot more than that, with an inside sales team that did all their prospecting, double their growth. And a couple of fun facts about me is we've got 6 kids today, and we're adopting at least 2 more. And for years, I've stuck to this sort of 20 to 30 or maybe 25 to 35-hour work week. Even though I do need to work, that $100 million with Salesforce is not mine. And I got married a few years ago, and we keep having more kids. So, for example, we had another first baby and another baby about 9 months ago, baby Darcy. And now this is Pari and baby Darcy. We had adopted a 16-year-old recently. So anyway, we have a lot of kids. We're going to be at least 8 this year, and maybe more. What happened?
Hey, Aaron.
Yeah.
Could you speak up just a little bit? We're getting a few remarks saying that you're a little bit hard to hear. Whatever you can do to boost the volume, we'd surely appreciate that. Thanks.
Great. I can do that. And I do find ways to try. I enjoy trying to integrate work and family when I can. So just bringing kids on speaking trips. Aurora helping me keynote a conference a couple years ago. But, a bit of what happened to me was 4 years ago I was single, and then I got married, so 2 kids right away from the prior marriage, and we started having a lot more. And I was like, oh, I got to make a lot of money. Because when I was single, I didn't have to make much. I made maybe $75,000 a year, just part-time, or here and there consulting. Got married, lit a big fire under my ass, and I grew 10 times in 4 years. And what I've noticed, because I do consulting with clients, again, B2B companies who are trying to grow, is that same thing. The company has something. Now, I've had clients that are $1 million, well, actually even less than $1 million, but say $1 million. I've also had clients who are $20 billion. They had something. They wanted to grow. Some of them grew 10 times. Like I've had clients who've added $100 billion or more in revenue. But also other ones floundered. Meow. So I know I've been just seeing what are the differences between these companies that break through and others that don't. So the first one, I've got these 5 painful truths, right? And the first one is the fact it's not them, it's you. And I know it's sort of a joke, and when people break up romantically, it's not you, it's me. But actually, it probably is you. Because what I've found, and I think this is a sort of big idea in general to keep in mind, is that when companies and your sales, whether you're 1 person or 1,000, it's very easy if there's salespeople involved to blame the salespeople for missing quota, right, and fire them. So if you have sales team churn of more than 10% per year, it's probably actually not your people. It's probably the system, probably sort of you as the company, or maybe even you as the CEO. Now, and the same thing if you're regularly missing sales goals. It's easy to blame clients, the market, the this or that, but it's probably not them. So start by taking a look at yourself. It could be you personally or the company. And what kind of system can you put in place to make it more likely that the people involved are going to be successful? So there's too much personal responsibility in general on salespeople. That needs to be more of a 50-50 split between the company and all the systems involved and the people themselves. And when we blame the salespeople, we're usually putting the blame in the wrong place and not really looking at the root causes of why they're struggling or why too many are struggling. This leads to the second one. The second painful truth is that comfort is the enemy of growth. And what that means is that, okay, you get off the ground. It actually could be a job or a company. You get $1 million or a few million, so you get off the ground, you get some customers. Great, that's actually really hard, but then you hit a ceiling. It's often between 1 and 10 million for new companies, but every company hits a plateau at some point, and people do as well. And this is such a common problem that's the cover of the damn book, right? Those hot coals. Something works, and then it stops working, and you struggle. So how do you figure out how to get past it? Now, there's 3 common reasons why this happens, right? And it's not about leads this or that, but really it's because your business or maybe your team is dependent on you. Right? There's a difference between them being able to depend on you and them being dependent on you. Right? You can't step away. A second reason is you've sort of tapped out your networks. Your personal relationships and the friends of friends you've tapped out. And actually, we're going to get to that in a minute. The third reason is because a breakthrough feels impractical or impossible, for quite logical reasons. If you're a consulting company, to try to come up with a software product just seems like, we don't want to do that. It just doesn't make sense, or it's impossible. It costs too much. Or if you're a software company, you might think, well, adding consulting or services, so that's not our model. Like, that's not scalable. Or if you're a consultant, writing a book feels like, I could never do that. So there's all these logical reasons why sort of these leaps that we need to make don't feel possible to us. And when I said comfort's the enemy of growth, it means that comfort, I would define here, is doing what you've always done, like even when you do it really well. And I think the classic phrase is, the devil you know is more comfortable than the devil you don't. So even when something's not working, it's easier to keep doing it than to try to really change. And so again, doing what you've always done, even when it works really well, because you never know when it's going to stop working, that is the enemy of growth, because growth requires change. And if you're really in a plateau, it probably means you've got a big change you need to make. So, third painful truth. We're going through these first three pretty quickly. I think they're hopefully simple. I say, without drowning, you may not hit escape velocity. Let me explain that. But there's a quote I heard. I don't remember where I found it, but it's this idea that, do you want, it's called success, or in this case, money, as much as a drowning person wants air? Again, for me, as a father, I went from being single, didn't need money. It was nice. It's easier to dream than to do it. You're like, hey, it'd be nice to have a lot more money or make it. But I didn't really need to until I had kids and a family. I'm like, oh, okay, I really have to make money. And I did. I said I grew 10 times in a few years. In fact, I still need to double again because we have a big family and a lot of bills. My nickname's Air, which is the joke there, right? So, it's easier to dream than to do it. So, where is that burning problem that you can find for yourself to motivate you? Because, again, to get bigger growth, it brings on big challenges, whether it's around the change or even when you grow, you might have more problems just from the growth. But without some sort of escape velocity of motivation, some sort of burning need that's going to power you through it, you're just going to fall back into old habits. How many times have you tried to quit smoking or quit sugar or eat vegetables? Same thing. Change is hard. So you need some sort of reason that's big enough that it's going to sustain you through that period, which could be weeks, it could be years. There's a lot of debate around, you need to find your passion. Unless you enjoy something, or ambition, just because people want to make money to be famous, that's a bad thing. So, I don't know, to me, whether it's you're doing it from some sort of passion to help kids or ambition to be famous, who cares? As long as you've got a reason that motivates you to get through this change and break that plateau. By the way, I'll be happy to we'll share some copies of these slides for people. Now, part of this, again, is when you're in a system, it's been working or not, there are reasons that you come up with that you don't want to change. And they make perfect sense. It could be if I wrote a book, who would want to buy it? If I don't know how to build software. We don't want to do services. We don't want to get into this market. There's a lot of reasons that make a lot of sense, logically. But usually it means you're avoiding some sort of significant change, or you're trying to avoid the uncertainty of doing something different because you're like, I don't know what's going to work, so I'm not going to do anything. So whenever you have this challenge, it's easy to use a challenge to avoid doing something different. In this case, you want to use it to embrace it. So use that challenge like not being able to pay salaries or not being able to raise money or whatever that challenge is in order to motivate you to get your ass in gear to really look at what is it going to take to cross that chasm and change and thus grow. Most companies I've worked with tend to want to avoid significant changes. They want to take baby steps, which is great. And again, if what you have is working and you're happy with it, fine. But if you really have something where you're like, we need to double our revenue, I need to 10 times my money, I need to triple, then the bigger the change, the bigger the change in you that you need to make, whether it's you personally or, again, with your team and company. So let's get to a bit more tactical explanations around what this means. And so this painful truth 4 is, getting more leads is not your main problem. I hear this time and time again. Partly the nature of what I do, because in my company, we help companies generate leads through outbound prospecting, whether it's outsourced or software or consulting. So I'm self-selecting there, but a lot of companies, they think, okay, we've got something, we've got product market fit, we've got this product or service, and we just need more leads. But more often than not, you don't. Sometimes that's true. But very frequently, and again, if you're really struggling with some sort of plateau, it's probably not the leads. So I'm going to share here is I call it the arc of attention. And it was from this workshop I do, and it'll be the next book. I don't know if you can see it very well, but I'll explain it. There's this arc, and on the right side is this when you're dealing with people, when you get off the ground with a company or you're consulting or you have investors, but you're getting most of your business usually through relationships. If you started a new job, you might have some sort of initial database of leads or something there to pick up. And in this case, on the right side, I said mom. And so the example is, let's say that you've got an early company, and you're saying, hey mom, will you listen to this presentation and give me some feedback? And it might take a couple hours. And she'll say, yeah. You're working with your personal relationships, or if you ask a friend, hey, will you give me some feedback? And he'll say, yeah. And so you'll get a half hour, or 2 hours, or 3 hours of their time for basically no other reason than they like you. They may not understand what the hell you're doing, but you have all this slack to take advantage of, which is what you should do. You want to start with the low-hanging fruit and from getting started. But once you tap out your existing relationships, and again, this often gets companies to, say, a $1 to $10 million range if they're new, but it also applies to companies, again, a $20 billion company where it's already sold to their current customers. And the point is then to get more business, to grow faster, to double or triple again, that's when you start to see, okay, we need to learn how to market or prospect to people who don't know us very well. And then you start moving to the left side where instead of getting 3 hours, you might get 3 seconds of their attention, or 0.3 seconds if it's a cold email. So the point is to make that change. It's actually a big change for most companies. From we're getting inbound, word of mouth, friends of friends, or even referrals from customers, get you to a certain point, and then you start. We need to grow faster. We need to reach out to people who don't know us. It's a whole new way of thinking and marketing when you're trying to talk to people in a slice of a few seconds rather than hours. In other words, you get off the ground and you get airplane rides to talk to people through introductions. In this case, you need to figure out how to market to people through elevator rides. Instead of an hour, it's a minute. Here's an example. There's companies, and this is very common. Get to the point because when you're getting off the ground, you're doing something new, you're tending to you want to capture all the opportunities. We can do that. Yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. Whatever you need, we can do that. And you end up sounding like it's a very vague approach. And this one I'll paraphrase. It's like, hey, yeah, we provide consulting services to big companies and small companies and big projects, and we help you maximize your money and you save. We help you make money and save costs with value-added solutions. Right? It's so vague it doesn't mean anything because they're trying to, sort of get anything they can. And that's not going to work to grow because it's too vague. What happens is these markets, when you have that kind of messaging, whether it's over the phone and email and webinars and PDFs, I love this slide where what we say to dogs is, okay, Ginger, I've had it. You stay out of the garbage, Ginger. Okay. Ginger, understand? And the bottom is the customers here, blah, 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 Ginger, blah, 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 Ginger. So this is probably one of the most important things to take away is that, again, when you're struggling with some sort of growth plateau, the first place to look is what is our niche? How can we nail a niche? Because oftentimes, again, if you're an early-stage company, you're probably trying to sell to too many types of targets. If you're a later-stage company, like that's $20 billion company, you know who you're selling to, such like banks, but you have too many products to sell. All right, so in either case, you're confusing people because there's too much clutter. And again, if you can really nail down, here's the ideal customer, and here's the one thing or two things that we want to start with, it makes it much clearer what you're offering to them and why they should be interested. You got to clear the clutter. And so when I say nail a niche, niche doesn't mean small. A niche means focused. Because we're talking about focusing on what's our best offering, who needs it the most, and how can we have a very simple way to intrigue them with it. Because when we're offering too many options to people, they just get confused. Or if it's not the right option. And when someone's confused, they say no. Now, they may not say the word no, but they might say later or maybe or I don't know or send me information. But that's really, they're like, the subtext is, I don't really see why I need this. Your job is to nail your niche to get rich. Now, these are going to be in the next book. I'm not going to explain each one, but in summary, the niche you're going after, there has to be enough sort of a popular pain to make it worth your while, where you can actually find people. And in terms of pain, it means they have something they need to fix. You're a need to have, not a nice to have. Also, you need to be able to show tangible results. Prove that you can do this. It's easy to make a claim, but how do you show that you can improve, that you can deliver the gain? Which relates to having a believable solution. Why should you have great marketing? Why should they believe that you can deliver on what you're promising? So case studies or roadmaps or something, but they have to trust that you can deliver. The fourth one is identifiable targets. Right? You need to be able to find either the channels or the people themselves. And the last is called unique genius, which is there's some sort of X factor. Could be, again, you're brilliant, or your team is brilliant at coding, or just working hard, or there's always some sort of X factor that gives you an advantage. But again, as you nail these down, you have a great market. I don't know about product market fit, but you have this market. You know how to target it. You can prove that you can do it. When you get these right, this is when you can grow fast. Because to win here, you want to be a big fish in a small pond. And frankly, it's a lot easier to make the pond smaller than the fish bigger. So when you focus your markets, or if you have a focus market, if you focus what you're trying to sell to them, it makes it a lot easier for people to see what you're doing and how you can help, for them to get it, rather than being overwhelmed and confused. So here's a quick tip, or what to do about this today. Because nailing your niche is a bit of a longer process. It's something that may not happen quickly. Usually it involves rethinking your markets and how you're really who you're going to sell to, and what do they need. But let's say you have a great product today. Again, picking what's the best market, best kind of target to go after, and then really thinking about, okay, they don't care what you do. They only care about what you can do for them, which means they don't care that you're a custom software development company. What do you deliver? My daughter Aurora here, when she asked me, hey, Dad, can you take me to get donuts? Why? Because she's talking about what she wants. But when she asked me, in my what appeals to me, what I care about is, hey, Dad, when we go to get donuts, that's actually some of my favorite memories. I'll remember these memories forever with you. Now she's speaking to me and what I care about. And that's what you want to do with your customers, your prospects. So here's 3 tips on how to do that. These come up here. Excellent. So instead of thinking about what do you do, pretend someone asks you at a party, hey, what do you do? Pretend they ask, how do you help customers? It automatically starts to reframe your mind in terms of results. Or if you're writing anything out, it could be an email, blog post, elevator pitch. Ask yourself, so what? So what's so great about that? We have this feature that makes our database scalable. Okay, so what? Well, it means that you get faster reports. Okay, so what? Well, you save time and so on. So you can keep asking this question, so what? Or another version, which is what's so great about that, in order to find where is a better description of the result you create that they're going to care about, that they want. So you can try this today, frankly. All right, let's move on to next painful truth. If you build it, they will come is a fairy tale, not just a movie. But I think this is a pervasive belief that has happened especially with the internet, which is, hey, if I just put this app out there, everyone's going to download it. Or if I just publish a book, or if I just get a YouTube video up, if I get the right one up, I'm going to get swamped. It'll go viral. But with a business specifically, again, there's this idea if there's to be some sort of magical thing that goes up there, I'm going to get a lot of inbound leads. People are just going to come to me. But even in the Silicon Valley, it's usually if I have the great product, I'm just going to get all these inbound leads. But the reality is, even with a perfect product or sales process, you're going to struggle without leads, without some way to generate them yourself. But with great leads, you can get pretty much everything else wrong and still do well. And there are these three types. And I say, like at home, we've got three types of princesses. This is Pari, having breakfast, because even a princess needs breakfast. And then there's Grandpa, right? And all the princesses are great. They just have different pros and cons. And the third type is our 6-year-old son, Maverick, which, you got to be careful when his 12-year-old sister has too much time and access to makeup, because funny things happen in the house. This is Maverick. Yeah, he's a boy, but too funny. Similarly, again, three types of leads, seeds, nets, and spears. They each have pros and cons. Different ones can work differently for your business. So if you've been dependent on word of mouth and referrals, and you've tried, it's pretty common. People say, well, we've tried prospecting, we've tried marketing, it hasn't worked. Well, maybe those just aren't going to work for your kind of business, or maybe you haven't tried them the right way. But for different businesses, they tend to work like your mix. They're all great, but your mix may change depending on your business. Just a little bit about seeds. I'll go through these with a couple details on each. I think the seeds really is word of mouth. And the idea is you're planting seeds. You don't really know exactly when they're going to come back to you. When you make your customers happy, it's hard to measure exactly how many more customers you get from that. But you're turning that kind of investment, the best way to make this predictable is to turn that investment in customer success into a system. So that you have ways to systematically bring customers, then you target the right customers, bring them on, and make them successful. And again, you can't take all the responsibility for them, but at least what you can control is if you're bringing customers on and they're not getting what you want them to get, what can you do to create consistent customer success? Again, are you targeting the right customers, making the right promises, delivering, and so on? And here's the hard part. Even if it means changing your business, and this is where I think people go sideways with Plateaus, is like, well, we're doing a great job, but again, think for these customers, what do they really need? Maybe they need more than what you're offering. If you do software, maybe they need services too. If you do services, maybe they need software too. Different complements. So like, what is really the whole solution you can deliver? And I know it's hard to create new offerings. And you may need to hire new people or do different trainings and marketing, but it's better to jump in and embrace it rather than avoid it. Now, my co-author, Jason Lemkin, I totally agree with this, is the number one tip here on customer success is just to do it bigger, faster. Because companies tend, whether you're hiring headcount for it, whether you're dedicating your time, they just wait too long. And it's a much more impactful way to spend your time in the early days than hiring salespeople. So the next type is nets. Now this is sort of marketing, doing one-to-many marketing. Pretty typical, each type has a different funnel. Usually a different kind of funnel, different conversion rates, expectations, sales cycles, and so on. This is why you want to know the pros and cons of each. And with marketing, you have probably a class. This is probably the oldest marketing funnel. Once seen this, you generate visitors and you convert some, and so on. And probably my favorite tip in marketing is just these days, everyone I think appreciates authenticity to make your emails, your marketing feel like it's for them. And anytime you can make it personal or add some flair, I think it's a good thing. Now, there's more details on this or other sort of marketing ideas in that ebook, but I think we're going to share it with you. Now, obviously here and even in this webinar I'm sharing, I've got some, this font is in my handwriting. It's based on it, at least. Mine's actually messier. And I got some family pictures and so on. So you can have fun with it. It doesn't have to be a technique. It can be authentic in the way you want to share yourself or your company's story that actually makes it interesting for people too. All right, last one, Spears, which is outbound prospecting. And this is, I think, what I'm in predictable revenue is most known for, which is on the system around a lot of Salesforce.com's revenue. And again, different funnel, different activities, different conversion rates, and so on. Sending emails, making calls, certain number of calls a month that convert to conversations, that convert to appointments, that convert to deals. Now, if you want to see a real outbound funnel, you can see that at predictablerevenue.com/Acquia. They were a client that was, I think, ranked, said by Deloitte & Touche, the #1 fastest growing software company last year. This goes through like number of emails sent and so on. Now, outbound, again, pros and cons for all these. Outbound is great. It can drive very predictable, fast growth, especially for bigger companies and to get bigger deals, which should be 3 to 10 times the size of your inbound deals, because you can specifically go after bigger opportunities. It's a great complement to inbound. I don't know why people argue inbound versus outbound, because it's like peanut butter and chocolate to taste great together, but it's not for everyone. So you got to think about, is it something that is going to work for you or not? And by the way, when people do outbound or sales emails, this would be one tip around outbound, how to get better. In general, salespeople are horrible at writing email, right? Because they want to put everything in the email to make sure we don't miss anything. Because what if they want that feature? What if they get this? But it ends up with emails that are too long, confusing, maybe a little bit flexible on the truth, just get to be boring and have vague calls to action. And I can't tell you how many of these, you may get them too, these LinkedIn emails around outsourced telemarketing services that all sound the same, around multi-touch, lead generation, on-demand, social media marketing, blah, blah, blah. If this looks interesting, call me. That's a very vague call to action. So anyway, here's the thing to do about sales emails, including outbound prospecting, or maybe even your whole marketing, which is how can you make what you're doing simple to understand and easy to answer, or simple to understand and easy to act on. It's that simplification, focusing. By nailing your niche, focusing in, it'll make your messaging a lot easier, including outbound email messaging. When you're trying to market or sell to too many people, sort of usually end up with messaging that ends up to be too vague because you're trying to speak to everyone, and then it doesn't work with anybody. So, quick note, I know outsourcing is interesting to lots of people. It's not some sort of magical solution. But what I feel it does do very well can be a replacement. If you're a small company and you just don't have the capacity to hire someone, that could be a great solution. But for fast growth companies, I think it's a great interim solution until you build your own team. I do think you need your own team internally for different reasons, including farm team, your knowledge and talents, and they're always going to do a better job than an outside company. So I'm a big believer in outsourcing. Great, like Carb.io is actually part of our company. Do a great job, but I don't think that they're the best long-term solution for most clients, and if you're really going to grow your company. So last painful truth, this idea around how you're fooling yourself. Because, and we all do it, hope kills. Optimism is essential, but hope kills. Because what we want is no surprises. And what I mean by this is hope implies this, I hope they buy it, or I hope people want this, or I hope that I get a promotion, or I hope I get money. Sort of like, I'm going to trust in the universe to provide. So optimism is different. Hey, I'm going to believe in myself. I'm going to believe I can get money. I can believe I can get the sales. Hope, I think, implies I'm not going to take responsibility. Hope is not a strategy, as Jeff here says. And what we want is no surprises. We want to know what is our true opportunity and what is not. Now, the thing is, when we're putting together, again, this could be an entrepreneur with like fundraising opportunities, especially salespeople with a sales pipeline, could be a marketer with sort of channel opportunities. It's great to have a lot of opportunities, right? Because look, there's a lot of opportunity. Excellent. And it feels like you've got momentum. And, may help you beat your goals because you've got a lot of opportunity. But because in a busy world that's getting busier, it tends to end up like the hoarder's bathroom or kitchen where you just have a huge mess. And it's easier to add great opportunities than to stop and sort of clean it up. Because there's a downside. Because when you have a lot of opportunities, you can get busy. You can feel productive even when you're not. It's also easier to avoid reality. So being honest with, what's really going to happen here? And again, if you're spreading yourself too thin, whoever you're serving, could be your employees or partners, customers, they're going to get worse service, right? So there's a downside to not spring cleaning or being really honest about your true opportunities. So it's another reason here to really specialize and focus your people. Right? This is still the number one thing to do if you're not doing it. Or if you don't run a sales team, specialize your time so that when you're juggling fewer things, I think it's easier to sort of stay on top of your true opportunity list. What's real, what's not, what stage, and so on. Right? And if you haven't seen this, this is again probably the number one idea, which is that makes the biggest difference in your world if you haven't done it, which is having prospectors prospect, closers close, other separate team or responsibilities for people for current customers. Excuse me. And if you have inbound leads, having people dedicated to receiving those. If you're just one person, you can specialize your time, which means if you know you need to prospect but you just can't get to it, because you probably need an hour or two, you block that out on the calendar. If you're an entrepreneur and you don't have a customer success person yet, block time on the calendar to focus just on customer success. I block out Wednesdays for writing, right? Because as an author, I can't write in a few minutes or an hour at a time. It just doesn't work for me. So figure yourself out in terms of what you need to block out and how in order to get that important thing done that you've been putting off. So, but back to the busyness. We're fooling ourselves. We tend to. And the problem is brutal honesty can be hard. Like, we want to believe we're winners. We want to believe our product is good enough, our content's good enough, our whatever is good enough, our team is good enough. And lots of times it is. But there's always something which isn't, where we need to change. Or else, because if we had everything working, everything was right, then we would be getting that growth we want. So again, with your opportunities, coming back to that idea of how often do you hear a clear no? They won't say no. They'll say later or maybe, let me get back to you. They might say yes. People hate to say no. And this is why it makes it harder for us to have a really clear view of what our true opportunities are. Because the truth can be hard. People want approval. We can be embarrassed if we don't know. And if we know the truth, it might lead to failure, or it might burst our bubble or rejection. It's like sometimes it's easier to believe in the hope of like, oh, that venture capital firm hasn't gotten back to me. Maybe they're still considering it. Now, this could be, if you're in sales, this could be you, whether the truth is hard for you, you might want approval from your boss. But for prospects, it's true as well. They don't like to reject people. This is true for everyone on both sides of these situations. Now, the problem is, again, if we don't have like a really brutal, honest list of our opportunities, we have a lot of maybe, which means we don't know, which means we can get anxious. We don't know, which is why we want predictability. But, and when we get anxious, we tend to hang on to everything that you could have a possibility. And it's not just in sales or business, it happens in love as well. My wife organized a fun party. It was a scavenger hunt, but the cake was a Harry Potter cake. Highly recommend scavenger hunt birthday parties. So with these opportunities, where we're looking at them, if you're an author, it could be publishing, but if it's sales, it's really sales opportunities. We have to practice really getting to difficult truths. It's not always easy to get to the truth, right? So what we need to do is find out the truth and hopefully why something is. Why are they excited or why are they not? And then once we know more of the truth, we can help them move on or out. Also, employees, I guess you can apply this to employees, right? Is this person really going to work out? Let's deal with it rather than sort of ignore it. Figure out, do they need to stay here or should they move on and out? Sales opportunities, employees, actually applies to a lot of life. And what helps here, again, whether you're a salesperson, let's just stick to sales, or managing them, or a VP, which is, really having this attitude of just helping without having an ego or an agenda. I don't need anything. I'm just trying to find the truth without judgment. If you're not going to buy, I'm not going to blame you or me. I'm not going to blame the rep. I just want to know the truth. And when there's no judgment, it's easier for people to be truthful. Again, probably true in parenting as well. And part of this is we want to be, again, there's this hope is a challenge because we tend to want to believe that it's possible. So there's this fine line. There's optimism, which is helpful, but hope is not. So I think in general you want to assume no unless you're proven otherwise. So if they're answering yes means yes, but anything else is probably not interested. And this is how you can tell, is if there's a way to find out why. Right? Maybe they're not a fit. Maybe they don't see the value. Maybe it's really not the right time, and later is a good time. Maybe you don't have the right person. Maybe they haven't opened your email. But you can't make any decisions. You don't know what to do until you can find out why they are not interested, or even maybe why they are interested. Slide to come up, I think. So meanwhile, we're going to have some time for Q&A here at the end. Here we go. So when I'm talking about getting to painful truths, or trying to get to the truth, the best approach is to try to make getting the truth easier. And I'll actually have some examples. But when we can have no guilt, try to make guilt out of the way, no judgment, give people easy outs to make honesty easier, and ask hard questions in friendly ways, it's easier to get the truth, the real status, right? When we're non-threatening or curious. But for example, when we challenge people, they're usually going to automatically be more defensive and be less likely to be blunt or honest with us. They'll try to avoid it. So here's some examples. Okay, in sales, you might say, hey, a little more challenging would be, hey, do you have buy-in from the CEO yet? Or where are you in your decision? Not bad, actually. And you can pull these off. Tone counts for a lot if you're talking to people. But what about if you asked it, what would it take to get this done by month end? So that's more of a question where we're working together rather than I'm working against you, or we're on opposite sides of the table. Again, we are going to share the slides. We can share them so you don't have to try to write these down. How can you be curious, not challenging? Right? A little more challenging is this a priority? And which also doesn't give you any context. Versus what if you asked, well, what else is more important than this right now? Again, being curious. Or, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to get this done or done by month end? And it helps gauge in their world how important is it or not. And if you know that, then you can decide, okay, you accept it, which maybe it's true, or maybe there's ways you can help them see why it should be more important. Last example, last one. Let me give you, sales and dating, or business and dating and romance have quite a bit in common. So now for the spouse, you can try this. For example, hey, the challenging one is, why are we having kids or adopting, right? Probably not the best way to start a conversation versus, well, hey, what concerns would you have about having kids or adopting kids? Or on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to have kids or adopt or have them by a certain year? Right? It's, again, working together rather than challenging. We're adopting a lot of kids, and I've had lots of people come up and say, I really would like to, but my spouse is concerned about X. So, last example, being investigative, not challenging. So again, a little more challenging is who's the decision maker. Not a bad question, especially if you're confident and you can make it very simple. But what about asking, well, who else is typically involved in deciding something like this? Or how would the process work to come to a decision on this? So it's a little more, again, working with them rather than at odds. So I mentioned these easy outs. Again, this is about how do we help the truth be easier to get to? You can call them breakup emails. You can give them a friendly challenge, which is you sort of giving them an assumed no. This could be an email or on the phone. Hey, I'll assume this isn't the right time or fit unless I hear otherwise. Right? Making it easy for them to say, oh, yeah, you're right. And they don't like to say no. People just don't like to. There's always exceptions, but now I would not use this approach with a spouse, by the way. I don't think this would go very well. This is just for sales or raising money or whatever it is you're doing. Not spouse friendly. So anyway, the more that you can it can be hard, but the more that you can learn to see the truth as delicious, and it can be painful to get to, and whether it's prospects or internal employees, or but if you can do it, it'll help clear everything up. It's so powerful when you can. I mean, honestly, as much as you may believe you have the full truth or you're good at it, I've always found there's more room to get bolder in getting to the truth. But the best part is remembering, and whether it's in love or money, is that when you can get that truth that they're not going to buy or not going to go forward or this person is not going to work out, at least then you can move one way or the other. And, you can get out of denial, deal with it, and know what needs to happen next. So in the newsletter, I'd mentioned I've got a duct tape trick. Now, if you weren't on the newsletter, I said, hey, we went to a spy weekend and we learned how to get out of duct tape if your hands are tied. Now, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that this works. It's a neat trick. It's not unlike what we're talking about here, where essentially, remember, if you need to change, you need to have like a powerful reason to do it. Part of this technique. All right, Mike, I'm going to pray this works.
5 layers. Okay, we're watching. 1, 2, 3.
It's about putting your arms in the right spot.
Ouch.
And then you push it way down.
You do the regular one?
Didn't work. You didn't want it badly enough.
Easier anyway.
Oh!
And then here's how it's done.
Mom's a pro.
Is you put them up.
Whoa!
I mean, you can have like
she
several
did it.
wraps of tape. It's like 3 or 4 or 5
Yeah, you
wraps
wanna do
of duct tape around your wrist. And you can break it that way. And it's possible. It's actually very fun to do. Everyone had fun doing it. It's like if you believe it and you just do it, and then if it doesn't work, you do it again. So this change, when you know you need to get out of the situation of not having enough cash flow or needing to make more money, or your competition is eating your lunch, like you just got to do it, regardless of how painful it is. Or at least move forward towards figuring it out. Being comfortable with the uncertainty of maybe not knowing how you're going to do it, but just moving forward with it. So I said we'll share this the new ebook, or right now it's an ebook, The Tripling Your Sales. And in summary, I said, if you have a challenge, again, use it to motivate you to fix it rather than trying to avoid it. It might be easier to avoid in the short term, but it's not going to be a solution. Nail that niche to get rich. It's like probably the most common reason people struggle. And then with lead generation, that's what drives your growth, what's going to be the best way to grow yours? Sometimes it's seeds, word of mouth versus marketing versus prospecting. I write about that in the Triple Your Sales ebook. Last one, specialize your people or time. Again, if you're not doing it, number one thing that makes everything work better. And last one, practice getting to the painful truth. Find ways to make it easier for you and the people you're dealing with to be, as honest as possible. Actually, that can apply to employees, prospects, family, anyone. All right, so I'm going to thank you. We've actually got some time for questions. And I know Mike here, he's been ranking them. Let me take a look at what we got. I'm going to put my contact information up on the screen. There's my email and Twitter and so on. I actually would really appreciate it because I'm going to do a shorter version of this in about a week for the InsideSales.com Summit. I'm also going to turn this into part of the next book. But if there's 1 or 2 things that really resonated with you, I would love to hear. If you could just send me an email. I guess you could tweet me, but email's easy, Aaron@predictablerevenue.com. I'd love to hear from you. I may respond quickly. I may not respond quickly, but I will respond. Again, 1 or 2 things that really struck you, I'd love to hear. So, let's go to some questions. So, one of the questions is from Donnie. Donnie says, what if your company focuses on 5 verticals? Could be finance, retail, et cetera. When you reach out to each company in a specific category, let's say travel, you explain in detail you're focused on travel. In other words, if you're selling to multiple markets and you reach out to the travel market, you only tell them about travel. Yes. Whenever the point of when you're segmenting your customers, you're focusing on that niche. Again, a company can focus on a niche, or you as an individual can sort of pick your niche. That's why companies focus some salespeople on enterprise and others on small business and others on finance, so you can be focused. You only want to give those prospects or customers exactly what they need to sort of move to the next step and nothing more. Because the more you give them with them asking, the more likely it's going to overwhelm them, or it'll be sort of too much work to go through it, and they're not going to do it at all. So less is more. Like having a niche, you might have customers from all around, but again, it's like the smallest amount of information you can give them is better. Patrick asked, what about building international sales teams, especially outside the U.S.? Well, partly depends on the stage of your company. There's lots of international opportunity. It's very hard. It's a lot of work, even if you're successful in the United States, to sell internationally. Usually, besides, you might get some inbound leads, but to really sell internationally, you usually have to hire an outside firm or a head of a country and hire people there, and that's risky and it's hard. And so generally, even with SaaS companies, software companies, they don't do that in a focused way until they're 10 or 15 or 20 million in revenue. I think it's pretty common. Because again, like doing anything in a big way, do it right, you need to put a lot of energy and effort into it. So it's better to pick fewer things that matter more than try to, or internationally, start just with the UK. Don't try to do 4 countries in Europe at once. So like being that big fish in a smaller pond, make the pond smaller so that it's easier to find your customers, get some early ones, get some references, and then use that to go to the next couple countries. Here, Mark asked about, hey, can I talk about customer success? Didn't quite understand why it's 5 times sales. I would say I and my co-author Jason mean is that if you have, very frequently companies hire, let's say you're a $10 million company with 10 salespeople, but you might have 0 customer success people or 1 customer success person. Or actually, let me phrase it. Even if I had a client called Bright Edge, and they're just now they've been taking off, and by the time they were between 10 and 15 employees, they had maybe it was 2 salespeople, but they had their first customer success hire. I think usually, now it's changing, but a lot of companies would hire 5 or 10 or 20 salespeople before they hired their first dedicated customer success person. So it should be probably in your first 10 or 20 people, you start having someone who's dedicated. Because again, when you have happier customers, you can have lower attrition, better references, better case studies. And that makes everything else better, your marketing, your prospecting, your closing. So that's why it's a much better return on investment to focus on customer success early than just trying to hire quota-carrying salespeople. Nancy had a question. Should your most skilled sales development reps handle inbound or outbound? Well, usually, because it does change depending on the complexity of what you're doing and the conversations they're having, usually your more experienced and skilled people are doing the prospecting, and usually inbound lead response, where they're answering 800 lines or inbound leads, tends to be the more junior position. So you hire someone for the inbound lead response. It's the fastest way for people to learn a lot about your company, get smart, and just ramp up with their knowledge because they're having hopefully a lot of conversations and doing a lot of emailing with people. And then they get promoted to prospecting. Prospecting, it's harder to learn because it's a lot slower to have conversations. Even when you hire prospectors, I think they should always start in the inbound lead role for a few weeks just to learn. But there are some exceptions where if you sell a very complicated product or service that needs to have some of that conversation up front, you might switch it. But that's the exception. The rule is inbound response to junior, they get promoted to outbound. Actually, Mark just asked, to confirm what I mean by customer success people, do I mean farmer-type salespeople? And is there some ratios? Well, for companies who have a customer base, there's some different versions on how you should organize there's some people who work with your customers who sell them more stuff and are on quota. And there's some people that may not be on quota who are just trying to help make them successful, like customer support. Customer support is kind of like a reactive approach to customer success. If there's a problem and we need to fix it. And I think now the idea of customer success is more about how do we prevent problems from happening in the first place. So they're complementary. But what I found is that sometimes the people who do customer success, who are focused on just trying to make customers successful, they might have a quota, which would make them sort of the traditional farmer salespeople for customers, and they have a quota. But sometimes they don't. So again, what I'd say is we'll send you this triple ebook. The first part has some case studies and more details around customer success programs. When do you do them? How do you do them? Metrics and so on. And that's probably the easiest place to answer your question in more detail. So I think we have time for one more question. And let me find a good one here. So Mike, if you're on, is there one that? Let's see here.
Man, there's a lot of good questions. It's hard for me to pick one. I wish we could get to all of them.
All right, so here's Ross, because he's a CEO and he's the only person in 21 years who's focused exclusively on new business. So he has other sales reps who've done new business and also worked with existing customers. Do you think specialization could be a key? So again, what I've seen is that specialization in terms of prospectors prospect, closers close, is the simplest idea that makes the biggest difference right away. Number one. And again, there's examples and more details in the ebook. But by focusing people's time and by having them do fewer things better, and it works in development, it works everywhere. I mean, have you ever had in soccer, you have a goalie, you've got forwards, defense, basketball, point guard, etc. There's no sports team that doesn't specialize. So why don't we specialize more in sales? I think it's a legacy approach from 100 years ago or 200 years ago. So in your case, I also would think if you're the CEO doing I don't know how much time you spend doing new business development, but if growth is dependent on you, you're going to be limited. As a CEO or anyone in the company, if someone is a bottleneck, you're limited. So you're always designing people out of the system so that they can do new things and the company can grow bigger. And sorry, one last question here is someone asked to explain outsourcing.
Hey, Aaron, if you want to take a little bit more time, feel free to do so and answer a few more questions. Yeah.
Okay. We do.
There's so many. I just would hate to not have them get answered. But it's up to you with how much time you'd like to spend.
Yeah. We can do another 5 minutes. I thought we were going to cut off. So.
No, we're good. Let's keep going.
So actually, there's a couple questions around outsourcing. Someone said, please explain it, or some examples. And there's a lot of companies out there there's all kinds of outsourcing. You can outsource development, you can outsource marketing, lead generation, et cetera, et cetera. And this I just had mentioned outsourcing prospecting or telemarketing or outbound, probably because that's my specialty, in our company specialty, in terms of just helping companies build outbound prospecting programs, whether they're outsourced or not. So I just know more about that than other types. And again, outsourcing, like anything else or any other function, I think it can be useful sometimes as a way to get started. If you're a small company, maybe it's your longer-term solution. And in this case, for companies will come to that I mentioned, carb.io, Carburetor, and they'll say, hey, we want to build an outbound prospecting program, but we don't want to hire people ourselves. Can you do it for us? Can you sort of generate appointments for us? So again, that can be a great way to get started. But I do believe that any company that wants to grow needs to control its own destiny. And just like with software development, almost always people end up bringing it in-house past a certain point. Same thing with sales. So it can be a good way to get started, but when you build your own internal team to do anything, whether it's, again, development or outbound prospecting, you get the benefits of people who know your company, culture, and markets better than anyone else. You also get that farm team system. It means you can hire people into a junior role. They respond to inbound leads, and then they can go do prospecting. They can learn there, and then they can graduate to sales. And so you get a much higher success rate within your sales organization. People know more. They give better service because they've gone through all the sort of the ranks in the company. So I'm a big believer in, I guess, outsourcing as a for a few months or 6 months, and before you figure out how to bring it in-house. Jordan had a question. As a CEO, would you personally reach leads, or would you fake your title to pretend you have a whole sales team? So I think what you mean is if you're a sort of like an individual entrepreneur and you don't have a sales team, would you put the term VP of sales or salesperson on your title to make it look like you're bigger than you are? I would not. I wouldn't lie. And it's not really, I guess it's not really a lie because you are a CEO, you're everything. So, at this point, the way you did it, you don't want someone on the other end to feel like they got tricked. So that would be your, if you were receiving that, at what point would you feel like it was misleading? Now, so you could have you could call yourself a chief conversation starter or a chief something and have multiple titles that way. So if it was more of like a funny way or entertaining and not meant to be misleading, that could work. So in this case, you have to use your judgment. So there's Andrew asked, we're recruiting a sales development role currently. Any advice on the type of person to recruit? I would. In fact, there's a whole guide at predictablerevenue.com/recruiting. I don't know, Mike, if there's a way for you to send that out to the whole, on chat or something. So predictablerevenue.com/recruiting. I think, though, the two things that you want to look for that you may not be typically for this role in sales. One is, are they coachable? How open are they to learning and trying something new? I mean, yeah, they say they are, but it's just a lot of people, they've found something that works and never change it. So how coachable are they? The second thing is, have they shown initiative in the past? Have they done something successfully? If they were a great musician, were they great at sports, or they started a nonprofit? Is it someone who has shown initiative where you don't have to hold their hands every time? And they can help be a little more independent and be able to, there's builders and there's growers. There's people who like to build things where it's interesting because it's not defined yet, and that's different than people who like to come in when it's all figured out and just do it. So again, if it's the first person, you want a builder. Do one more. And let's see here, I'll pick a good one. There's a question, what's the best way to get your first 5 or 10 customers? Honestly, the way to do it when your first customers is just by hustle. You email everyone you know, you call everyone you know, you go stand out in front of a coffee shop. It depends what you're selling. There's no magical way to do it except through just doing it, going out and busting your butt in some way. So it's obviously easier always to rely on your personal networks first. If you remember the arc of attention, when you're getting referrals from your family, your friends, investors, or anybody, the people you get referred to are just going to give you more extra credit than if you are cold calling. But there's no magic way to do it. Just whatever works, just do it. Get out. I would say just get out from behind your computer and go do it. It's easy to sit behind your computer and type and avoid. It's easy to Google and do research and rather than just go out and talk to people. So the more, here's one tip maybe you can use is, reach out to anyone you can who could be in the space and either be or know someone who's a potential buyer, and just ask them out either for coffee or just a phone call, do some research. You're just trying to learn. That's what you're doing, or lunch. And if you can get a few, even 5 of those together, even one, you'll learn a lot just by, I wouldn't call it an interview, but by learning about them, what's important, what else is out there, and sort of saying, hey, I'm thinking about this. Not selling them, but you can gauge their interests, get some feedback, and then they might then ask them, well, who else should I talk to about this? Or would you know anyone who you think would be interested in buying this? So that's another way you could approach it. So, all right, thank you, everybody. We're up. There's going to be a recording of this, so again, I'll talk to Mike. We can send the slides out. Also, they're going to post a recording, which you can share, and I appreciate it. I would love it if you can email me, Aaron@predictablerevenue.com. If there's 1 or 2 things that you loved and really stuck out, we covered a lot of ground today, and be a big help for me in terms of crystallizing this into sort of the next book and so on. And I want to thank you for your time today and knock 'em dead. Thanks.
Hey,
Mike,
Aaron,
too.
one more plug for one more plug for your speaking spot at the Sales Acceleration Summit. If people want to sign up for the Sales Acceleration Summit, it's basically the world's largest online summit, and Aaron is one of 70 amazing speakers. You can just click the Register Now button above your slides and come on out and check it out. It should be a good time. It's on May 7th. So once again, we appreciate Aaron being on today. Amazing. Thanks for answering all those questions. There were some really good ones. So we appreciate it. Anything else before we sign off?
No. Thanks, everybody, and I'll
right.
talk to you. Mike will be. I think Mike will be the one to send you some stuff after.
Yep, we will reach out. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.